hot topic at the moment. Artificial intelligence. What's
The moment you said hot topic, I knew that's what you were
yeah,
going to say.
you knew exactly where I was heading. In terms of journalism, in terms of writing books, do you think that, two-part question, do you think that AI is going to be the downfall of quality writing? And also, do you think that it is a viable model for people to use within journalism? Bearing in mind that there was an article that I read, I'm going to say about a week ago, where Amazon reduced the number of books that were allowed to be published per 24-hour period because there was people utilizing AI to mass produce books at a high speed and then publish them and sell them on Amazon. What do you think?
So, I'm not going to say all AI is evil, get rid of it. There are uses for it. I can see that.
Yep.
One of the nice things that I've seen, or one of the lovely uses I've seen, is that I have a friend who English is not his first language. But now he primarily, for the past, 10 years or whatever, has communicated primarily in English. And is interested in being a better writer. And has used things like Grammarly before and whatever. And one of the things that he does is he'll write something, put it into ChatGPT, for example, and say, can you write this better for me? But the difference...
So he uses it as a learning tool.
Yes, exactly. But specifically, that is the point. Because the difference for me is that rather than chucking it in and not looking at it and just using what it's taken, he actually looks at the difference and seeks to learn. So I think if someone is trying to think of AI, writing, tools and things like that as a replacement, it's not going to work at the end of the day, especially in certain contexts. If you're looking at it as an aid, then it can in certain contexts, not all. So, for example, as a journalist, one of the biggest things we do is research. I think the danger also is that it can make people lazy. If you think about when you used to drive somewhere before the invention of GPS, right?
Yep.
Now, and I catch myself doing this too sometimes, I will literally be driving down the road somewhere that is very nearby. It's not complicated or difficult for me to get to, and I'm going to just chuck it into Google Maps.
Yep.
Even if I kind of know where I'm going. It's kind of a safety net. If I'm doing it for the sake of traffic, then I understand. But it's like automated at this point, and it's because it makes us lazy. It's kind of, when you park.
Yeah.
We're so busy looking at the camera, and the other day my camera wasn't working. I'm like, do I still know how to park, like reverse park? Thankfully I did. But I think sometimes technology is there to help us, but it's dangerous with whatever it might be when it takes away our ability to think properly and look after ourselves. And that is the part that always worries me about any kind of tech.
I read an article a couple of weeks ago, and it's actually about a study done on, speaking of Google Maps, but it was done on taxi drivers, I'm going to say in New York, and it was a test about the prefrontal cortex, I'm going to say, in terms of memory. And the test was about how fast they learn, where the streets are, what the names are. And in taxi drivers, in comparison to the average person, their prefrontal cortex, I think that's right, but whichever part of the brain carries the memory, is actually biologically larger than what it is in the average person, because that's a muscle that they use on a regular basis within their job to remember the way the streets are and driving, so they don't actually use GPS. Which I thought was very, very interesting. But back to the AI thing for a moment. I find it very interesting how some entities are actually dealing with it. So as an example, I'm finishing my master's at the moment, and they are very, very strict on the usage of AI, and obviously testing the documentation and testing everything to make sure that obviously it's not run through AI. And then another entity was Forbes. So Forbes have contacted me to be a part of their communications council, which is a bit odd. But hey, I would say no. But one of the conditions that was in the information that was sent was that they clearly state that if you are submitting an article, that you need to submit the research evidence. They also test it as well to make sure that it's not written by AI, obviously, to quantify where it's come from and that you've actually done the work.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's the way forward for most entities like publishing houses and magazines and newspapers and stuff like that? Or
yeah, I think it should be. I mean, there are publications out there who say things like, this was co-written with AI and whatever. But see, there's also the ethical question that you have to bring into things. So first there was the, is it going to make us lazy? Is it going to make us forget how to do things properly? There's also the ethical question being twofold. One is that, who's going to be honest about it? Some people might not. And that's going to help them gain a leg up and gain opportunities that they might be taking from someone else who's actually put in the work to improve their craft and do that research, which is not fair.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's always going to be some way that people who are going to do those kind of things will always find their way to skirt around it. But there is also the fact that what is teaching the AI? What is it learning? You've got all these famous authors out there where is it plagiarism? That's the big question. When AI is learning how to create art, when it is learning how to write, who is it going to write in? So let's say you were to type something saying, write this article in the style of so-and-so. Is that fair? Is that ethical? Because the knowledge that it's taking, you could, some people have argued saying, it's the equivalent of if a human sat there and spent like 20 years, obsessively studying the writing style of one person, and then they learned how to emulate their style, whereas AI can spit it out faster. But that's the point. You would have put in all that effort to learn, and somewhere that's the difference for me. Somewhere in that journey of studying this person's work, let's say if you were to use that example, you would inevitably develop a certain level of respect for that person's work.
Yeah.
Whereas a machine is not capable of feeling those emotions. People say that you might be able to teach it so down the line, and who knows where technology is going. But I don't think so. One of the big parts of my job at a previous job was to look at the sensitivity check of certain things. So, for example, a machine, an algorithm could say, okay, well, this avatar of Blake is looking at all these different things. Or let's say, we pick this random person and this woman's been looking at baby names and she's been looking at baby prams and baby clothes and looking at all these things. So let's just pummel her with advertising about babies.
Yeah. And
the woman will have a miscarriage and she will still get pummeled with baby advertisements and making her feel awful. It's the algorithm. You can't stop it. It doesn't mean to be hurtful. It doesn't care. It's not thinking about that. But a human being would be able to understand that, and I know that's not the same as the straight up AI context, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, it's not able to think of the empathy of how someone might interpret it and how the change of a few words, you can say the same thing in a very slightly changed way, and it will mean something completely different based on who your audience is and the way it feels.